In chapter 246, titled All a Lie, it starts off in a hospital with a Christian symbol on top of it. For those not familiar with Christianity, it's a religion that follows Jesus Christ and believes him to be God. At least the Trinitarian branches of Christianity that believe in three persons, being the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, all being one specific God. What's interesting about this parallel, however, is that Yamashita, Ryuki, and Oma are rushing to see Kiryu Setsuna, who is in critical condition after his fight against Tokita Nico. During this chapter, Ryuki talks about how Gayomukaku had controlled Ryuki's way of thinking, saying the following: "Grandpa put me in chains and forced his way of thinking on me. I blindly accepted that as normal and I stopped thinking for myself." And this is Ryuki reflecting back on how Gayomukaku was trying to control him. However, shortly after that, they then get a hold of Setsuna's notes, and in those notes there's a lot of interesting stuff on there which is mostly figured out. Even the triangle that has eyes inside of it sitting on a throne, most people know that this refers to Shen Wulong, who later on in that same chapter is sitting on a throne watching TV. But the only thing that still remains a mystery till this day is one part of Setsuna's notes where he simply writes "false god." And in this video I'm going to be going through exactly what that means, and when you look back on my introduction that seemed to have quite a few tangents, you will understand exactly why I brought those things up. But first, before we even talk about false gods, let's talk about real gods for a second here. And by real gods, I'm talking about real gods in Kengan Omega. We know so far in the story, this refers particularly to one person. In contrast to, let's say, the Wu clan or the Kure clan or the Westwood faction that are all referred to as demons because of their association to Wu Hei, who was the first demon. When it comes to the gods, there is only one god, and that is Shen Wulong. Now what's interesting about this is that even Shen Wulong's clones are also referred to as gods. For example, Kiryu Setsuna himself referred to Oma as God. In fact, that was one of the biggest points in his character in Kengan Ashura, where Kiryu Setsuna viewed Oma as this vengeful god that was here to deliver him basically to hell. And then there is Ryuki. Ryuki's title is literally the Omega, which is a deity-like name. However, if you're still doubting that Ryuki is a god to a certain extent, we even have Kiryu Setsuna again referred to Ryuki as a god in the Berserker Bowl tournament, where he said that he was training Ryuki to take down the old god, which was Oma. Again, both Ryuki and Oma are referred to by Kiryu Setsuna as gods, which brings us to Shen Wulong. And though he is the easiest to actually understand that, of course, he is a god, the worms sort of follow him till the end, and he is venerated by most of his heads. And even Gilbert is one of those people that looks up to Shen Wulong a lot. In fact, William even questions that in chapter 183 when he's with Gilbert in the inside. He's confused as to why Gilbert, who he views as the pinnacle of strength and what the Westwood faction has been building up to, he wonders why Gilbert even submits to this Shen Wulong person. And right before he calls Shen Wulong a god, his inner thoughts are cut off. And so we now know Shen Wulong, Ryuki, and Oma are referred to as gods. The only black sheep is Lohan. However, considering Ryuki and Oma are gods because they are clones of Shen Wulong, Lohan more than likely also fits in the god picture. But admittedly, he is the black sheep of the gods here. So now that we know what the true gods of the Kengan Omega verse are like, let's now start speculating about what the false god is. Because whatever this false god is has to be able to pass as God in the first place. And so the first place that I will look at is actually the end of the fight between Kiryu Setsuna and Togita Nico, aka the last Nico. Towards the end of the fight, in fact, this is Kiryu Setsuna's last words. He says, "Oma, at last I can become a god." Now this is right after Setsuna is confident that he's going to be able to defeat Nico. And what was an important point in that fight is that Setsuna was not actually fighting for revenge. He himself said that Nico was worthy of dying because he had simply hurt Oma. However, I suspect there's actually a bit more to that story, which is revealed in what Setsuna says here. Setsuna believes that by removing Nico out of the picture, that somehow he can become a god, which could mean two things. One, what he meant by that statement was that Oma would be eternally in debt to Setsuna, so Setsuna would be a god to Oma in that way, where Oma is just grateful to Setsuna all the time. And or, because both of these options are compatible, that Nico is in competition with Setsuna to become a god. And so, looking at what Nico has been doing, aka looking at his Tiger's Vessel project, is key, because we know from Setsuna's own notes that Shen Wulong is the Tiger's Vessel. So God is the Tiger's Vessel here, which is something that Fei Wangfang probably came to that realization as he took a closer look at Oma, because he realized that Oma sort of looked like Shen Wulong. And because of that, the Tiger's Vessel was never going to be one of the other Nikos, which means that the Tiger's Vessel was never going to be any one of Nico's students besides Oma, if we can even call Oma his student. And so everything that Fei Wangfang believed about the Tiger's Vessel, or what Nico had told him about the Tiger's Vessel, that the Tiger's Vessel would be someone who would inherit all of the Nico style and get that power, was all a lie. Because one of the things we actually get from the Gaio Mukaku flashback about Nico, who is Nico number 6 at that point in the story, is that he was willing to use even his own brother at some point in order to grow in strength, since he was very observant. Gaio Mukaku even calls out the last Nico here and says that he knew that Nico number 5 was gonna die from excessive use of the advance, and that was specifically why Nico number 6, or the last Nico, chose him specifically. From this pattern, we know Nico is self-serving. He isn't going to be someone who is going to give up power to anyone else. And so, all of his students, including Agito, Fei Wangfang, and many others, were all just a means to an end for him. But that only really tells us about his Tiger's Vessel deception. It doesn't quite get us to the false god mystery here. And so I wanted to talk about the thing that would glue all of this together, and that is the current power dynamics in the story so far, ever since Shen Wulong has sort of jumped onto the scene. And probably Nico has been aware of this power dynamic for a while, since he is one of the worm heads. Currently, in the story, Shen Wulong is the strongest, and he is not just the strongest, he's the strongest by a mile. And to properly illustrate this, we need to talk about Lohan being the second strongest in the verse currently. I know some people are skeptical about this, but hear me out, because it makes a lot of sense, not only through multiple statements in the story where Shen Wulong literally says that Lohan is the closest man to him, and he can't actually mean by personality, because Shen calls Lohan a monster, but he also can't mean that Lohan is incredibly close to him, because he does say that Lohan would never win. So even though Lohan is probably not on the same tier as Shen Wulong, which is something I go through in another video where I talk about more evidence like Wulong being compared to Lohan in multiple instances in the story. But for now, I ask you to humor me in this point. Because if Lohan is the second strongest in the verse, notice what happens. Shen Wulong is the strongest in the verse, but also Shen Wulong's clone is the strongest in the verse. And that properly illustrates the gap between Shen Wulong and everyone else when only Shen Wulong can come close to Shen Wulong, which is something that Nico probably would have come to the conclusion of, and why I said that Nico could probably never become the final villain, because I said that Shen Wulong is already in the story, and that so long as he's in the story, and Lohan was in the story as well because I thought that he was a better candidate, Nico can never become the villain or the final villain in any meaningful sense. But if he becomes Shen Wulong somehow, then all of a sudden he gets the one advantage that Shen Wulong has, and that is Shen Wulong being Shen Wulong. And that is probably what the whole Tiger's Vessel plan is for him. Because I think that the Tiger's Vessel isn't just someone who will inherit all of the Nico techniques, which is something he has been building up more and more as the series has been going on. He has been building on the Nico style and his strengths. But I think he wishes to complete this power by becoming the Tiger's Vessel. So the Tiger's Vessel, like I had discussed in my best Tiger's Vessel theory, which was slightly off, the Tiger's Vessel is probably just going to be used as a body of power, similar to how Kenjaku is using Geto's body in Jujutsu Kaisen, which brings us to the cyber brain. We know that Shen Wulong doesn't have much stocks in the cyber brain, but the fact that the cyber brain is in the story means that it is going to be used at some point, and I think that Nico may be the one to use it. At this point, you've probably figured out, yeah, Nico in Oma's body, or the Tiger's Vessel's body, is going to be the false god, someone who is Oma but not Oma at the same time. And if Nico is able to achieve this, he will become the strongest in the verse and become the final villain, which is the end of this theory. Don't forget to like and sub, and hey, I hope this theory was a little bit interesting because it does go over some of the ideas I have explored before, but one of my stances that I did have was that Nico could not become the final villain, and this theory sort of changes things for me, because now I think the condition for Nico to become the villain is becoming Shen Wulong, which is now a lot more plausible. But yeah, this is going to be something that will be holding y'all over for my 1000 sub special until my Kengan vs Purgatory retrospective comes out. So until next time, take it easy.